Hi, this is Greg Garrett, and I'm speaking to you from Gladstone's library in Wales. This is part of the series called UnChristian Politics, and I've talked to you about some of the ways that our secular values get embedded in what we think of as our religious belief, our way of being, our way of thinking. I've talked a little bit about the distances that we place between those who are different from us and ourselves, and the emotions that sometimes rise out of that keep us separate from them. Today I want to talk about another problem related to our unchristian politics, and that would be our failure to compromise, our extremism, our unwillingness to accept that anyone else might have some other part of the truth. I am a believer in extremism, and I understand that there are times when it is absolutely the only response. Martin Luther King used to say in response to the racism, which was a pervasive part of American society in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, that one could not be anything other than an extremist against it. And when he was accused of extremism, he said, well, we're all extremists. The question is, what will you be an extremist for? And perhaps that's our question. Will you be an extremist for love? Will you be an extremist for accommodation? Will you be an extremist for compassion? Will you be an extremist for those things that bring people together as one as opposed to the things that divide people into smaller groups? People devoted only to their self-interest. In American politics just now, there are several groups of people who find it very difficult to compromise on any of the issues that matter to them. In fact, in recent years, some people have been elected to Congress on their pledge not to compromise, which seems to me not only to devalue the entire democratic process, what it is that we hope will happen when we send people to Congress to get things done, but it also seems to me decidedly unchristian. It seems to represent the idea that I hold all of the truth and you hold none of the truth. And therefore it's impossible for me to compromise with you to make anything happen. There are no accommodations that can be reached between us. In the history of the church, there have been instances in which people have come together with intractable positions and have managed to find compromise. In the early church, the great apostles, Peter and Paul, had differing views on some of the things that Christians should or should not do, and were able to reach some accommodation about those. In more recent years, my friend Brian McLaren, an expert on the church that is coming into being in the 21st century, has pointed out that too often in the past we have found it impossible to compromise about things that don't even really matter, and have made things issues of dogma, forced people to believe them, when they are not even the central parts of our faith. When we think about the central parts of who we are as human beings and who we are as Americans, those are things that we need to think about very seriously and to increase the amount of compassion and freedom and respect that we have. But they don't necessarily come from the policies that we put forward that we think are necessarily right. So it is that a couple of months ago, the radio broadcaster Rush Limbaugh was speaking out on behalf of many of his constituents, people who did not want to see birth control provided by insurance providers. A young woman who was a law student at Georgetown's School of Law spoke in the opposite direction. She wanted to have that facet of her health care covered. And a huge national controversy resulted when Mr. Limbaugh said some fairly uncomplimentary things about this woman who spoke out in favor of the coverage of birth control. What happened in the midst of this controversy, where it seemed that neither would be able to compromise, was that Jack DeGioia, the president of Georgetown, which is of course a Catholic university and which of course opposes birth control on religious grounds, spoke out into that tumult, and he used the words of Augustine, who in one of his rather more minor pieces of work nonetheless was saying, it is entirely necessary for us to proceed as though neither of us has the complete truth. You listen to me, I will listen to you, and together we will arrive at the place where we are supposed to be. It was a place of Christian reasoning, interjected into what had become very unchristian politics. And I wish that we could see a little bit more of this understanding that you and I should work together to find the truth, and not abandoning our important positions, but learning about the positions of others so that we can find some place of compromise. That's how democracy works.